Welcome back to the Redefine the F Word podcast series presented by the Women in Business Association and The Bridge at UTSC. I'm your host, Namisha Fernandez, and I'm the co-president of WIBA. Today, we're very excited to have Alina and Matt for this final episode to end off the series. This fireside chat episode will answer all of your questions that you may have had as you watch the past 5 episodes. And Matt and Alina, they've touched on failure, they've touched on product versus people, wellness and resilience, and what pivoting looks like with owning your own business and your own brand. So Alina and Matt, thank you so much again for first off leading this whole series and for coming today to record this episode.
Thank you again for having us.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Amazing. I guess we can get started with the first question then. So our first question touches on defining failure. And we're kind of going to go, episode by episode because each episode touched on a different topic. So episode 1 was really focusing on defining failure. So I think we can start off by saying, do you feel like there is a connection between imposter syndrome and overcoming failure? And if there is, like, how have you dealt with imposter syndrome within your career, within your experiences? If you can touch on that.
I think imposter syndrome is simply something that we're uncomfortable. We always feel it when we're uncomfortable in a space. So I think there's some connection for me anyway. When something is not working, the first question you ask is it me? Do I not belong here? Maybe I'm not good enough to be here. Of course, that there is a connection between the two. However, I also have this view that if you don't feel uncomfortable and you know everything there is to know and you feel like you belong, it's probably time to go, right? Because you're probably not challenging yourself and you're probably not trying hard enough. So I always go back to this advice that I got because I'm a very I'm a beginner when it comes to learning how to ski, for example. And somebody once said to me, "If you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough." So that's kind of where I would draw the line is that when you feel like you're an imposter, if you will, also remind yourself that you're still learning and allow yourself that space to not know everything, right?
Yeah, all of that resonates with me. There's this direct link between achieving your goals and having to change who you are. And so if you need to change who you are, you're going to have imposter syndrome because you're working on becoming that person who can do that thing that you want to be doing. So there is this constant tension of am I capable? Am I going to be able to do this? Do I have the X, Y, and Z to get there? And fundamentally, yes, but that doesn't stop the feeling of I'm in over my head. But we need to continually be in over our head to make change and get to where we want to go to. So I absolutely agree with it, with what Alina's saying, and that feeling, that feeling of the imposter syndrome or having those kinds of things come up doesn't mean that you're not capable of doing it. It just means that you're not currently there, which as I said, I mean, it makes sense because we are constantly as entrepreneurs leaning into that unknown.
No, I totally understand that. And I think like you guys brought up some really great points, especially on how, like both of you said, with imposter syndrome, especially, you're doing what you have to do and you're doing it well, but you are underestimating yourself. And I feel like a lot of individuals go through that, and I'm sure you both have gone through that. So yeah, thank you for shedding light on that. And I think it's something that a lot of like successful people as well go through, as well as students go through in like our everyday life as well with exams and everything like that. So yeah, that sounds great. And I feel like that ties into our next question, which is, I would say, diving into episode 3. So in episode 3, you guys talked about, product versus people. And you mentioned that sometimes having friends as your colleagues can be very tricky to manage and can be kind of hard to kind of navigate. So one of the questions that our listeners actually reached out to and asked was, what approach do you think is important to manage expectations and boundaries without losing your personal relationships with those specific individuals outside of your work? Because I feel like that can be kind of hard to navigate.
I would say that for this one, it's a cliche, but prevention is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So asking these questions or having these conversations ahead of time will save you a lot of headaches so that you don't do it from a place of reactivity or an emotional place when things come to a head. So trying to be as proactive as possible and not just going, oh, it's going to be great because we love each other, but rather saying we love each other. That's why we want to do this. But what problems do we foresee, or how are we going to manage when problems come up, even if we can't identify necessarily what the challenges will be? What is the protocol that we will have to handle that in a respectful but um, logical way?
Kind of like a prenuptial agreement, isn't it? Because when you get together as friends, you do love each other and you have a certain level of care. Um, but when people get into a work environment, they could be a different person because when I'm in a social environment, believe it or not, I'm actually quite relaxed. I'm really easygoing. But when I'm in a work environment, it's totally different. I'm super intense. And so it's not that I'm a different person in my core. I'm still the same, but I just hold different standards to myself when I'm in my different capacities. So absolutely, having that conversation at the beginning is so important. And why I say it's kind of like a prenuptial agreement is you figure out how to work things out if something doesn't work when you're not in the middle of a fight, when you're not hating each other, because it makes a lot more sense that way. And I think the only thing I would add to what Matthew said is to have a constant check-in as well. If you're friends, you want to have a constant conversation throughout your journey together and say, hey, are we still there? Is there something you'd like to see change? Or is there something I'm doing that's, that you don't like or whatever? And having that constant dialogue and is so important if you want to maintain that personal relationship. And the you mentioned boundaries, and I think people are really shy to draw boundaries between friends. And they often feel like, oh, I should never say no to a friend. I should never uh, deny someone. But when it's work, you have to compartmentalize and it's not personal. And having that clarity between your friend and yourself saying, hey, just a reminder, this is professional. We're not at a bar. We're not at each other's house. We're in an office. So let's make sure that you don't take this personally or this decision or whatever it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's so easy to cross the line. And I think it's like kind of hard because the lines are very blurred. You can either have like a very professional relationship or a very like, personal. But when it's both, it's a little bit hard to navigate. So I feel like I can just give an example. Like, for example, Falk and I, like, we were friends before we became co-presidents. And I know co-presidency for a club is nothing compared to, being an entrepreneur for a business. But I feel like kind of navigating like we hung out outside of WIBA and kind of navigating like when it's WIBA time, it's time to get to work. I feel like that involved communication and being able to have constant check-ins like you guys mentioned, because it's so easy to kind of get lost in like the club tasks and kind of get lost with that you kind of lose the core of the friendship, and it can seem like that. So yeah, I totally agree with what you guys said, and like having those constant check-ins is so important.
And one thing to say is that when it comes to the boundaries, you also have to shut it down and go back to being friends. Like you said,
Yeah.
you can really get sucked into talking about work all the time if you guys work together.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to be friends with someone you work with because you share the same interests, you share the same values and things like that. So that person is probably going to connect with you in a very personal way. So it really is important to draw the boundary and say, hey, we are now hanging out as friends, no work talk, no shop talk. Like we're just gonna talk about other things so that you can go back to that friendship, right? And so yeah, so I mean, I think it's so hard, And one more thing I would add is really read the room when it comes to your friends. If that person's important to you, you will know if you said something, even if it's in a work capacity, that kind of tweaks them the wrong way or whatever. Address it after, and address it immediately because you don't want something to brew, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that can, I guess, lead into our next question, which is about wellness. So in episode 4, you guys talked about wellness, and resilience and being able to, take care of your own well-being while also, feeding into the baby that is your business. So considering a lot of businesses rely on social media to promote their business. And there's also encouragement to take breaks away from social media, to detox and de-stress. Um, and also be less distracting and compare yourself to others. When do you think is the right time to take a break from social media usage, to create that healthy balance in your life? Because I feel like, especially as an entrepreneur, social media is one of your main platforms, and being able to kind of navigate using it for personal as well as professional use. What would you guys say about that?
That is, it's a really tough question because we know that social media is has been curated to wreak havoc on our brain. Um, it causes certain types of reaction that keeps us coming back for more. It sucks us into the thought patterns around comparison and performance. So if my post doesn't perform as well, I can be quite hard on myself. Um, I think what I would say is similarly to what was discussed in the episode is around incorporating that into your strategy. So don't wait until you're feeling really overwhelmed with it to go, oh, I need to take a break. And similarly to a point Alina made is that, there are going to be moments where there's more focus on something, on getting into the work. And then there are other times where you can breathe a little bit more. So um, it's going to be hard to have a hard and fast rule around this is what you should do, but recognizing that um, it is important to consider that when you're creating a strategy, when you're figuring out what types of posts you're going to do, and be flexible. Like maybe there are going to be times where you don't want to do a ton of reels because it takes a lot of time to film, to edit, to put subtitles, to do this, to do that. So what other things can you do then that will keep your consistency, that will deliver on the pillars that you want to be, on the pillars that you're wanting to touch upon, but takes less stress. And then be firm with yourself around not being attached to the outcome and saying, because there's going to be a lot of algorithm components that go into it, like the time of day, keywords used. And I don't know if it's sunny that day. I don't know how it works, but just be conscious of it when you are planning your strategy. How am I going to prioritize my own well-being?
No, I definitely second that. For me, I personally do not like, I don't love social media or the obligation to create content. It is exhausting and extremely distracting to actually operating your business. So, like Matthew said, I did change our strategy when we would film content. We would do it all at once, and then what we do is we kind of trickle the content into social media, so it allowed me quite a bit of time and break in between where I actually don't go back to social. It looks like I'm always there because we're posting content, but you'll probably notice I'm wearing the same clothes because I've made multiple series, like even with our different episodes. Like you can cut up content, and that could be part of your strategy if you're not really into constantly creating content. You can do it at once, you can time it, you can build it into your strategy, as Matthew said. I do find that taking breaks from social media has been really helpful for me because I'm not naturally someone who likes to be on camera. I mean, you can tell that by the first episode, my camera wasn't even on. And but I'm naturally just someone who likes to work in the back. So I would also encourage those who to really look internally and say, is this really me? And is this something that just because the world is demanding you to be on social media doesn't mean you need to, because you can be successful. And sometimes if you're not the type of person that needs to sit in front of a camera, there are other ways to find success in the journey of being an entrepreneur. So I mean, we can get into that at a different time, but there are so many things that I've done in my career that did not even require me to be on social once. So starting a tech company where I was then asked, "Hey, you need to create all this content," was quite uneasy, and there was a whole lot of imposter syndrome going on, you know. But what I realized was creating a bit of space between the content really helped me take the necessary breaks. So I would probably encourage people who want to take breaks to probably film all their content all at once, do that, and then have the break, and then come back and just time it.
And remember why you're doing it in the first place. Because, for example, when I actually I've recorded a post about this because I think it's hilarious. I look back on the stuff that I was putting out when I first started my social media for my coaching business, and I was like mortified. I was like, oh my God, this is so bad. Um, but so you do pick up tools and you learn, okay, so there needs to be a hook, and then there's this, and then there's that. So you start to learn some techniques for how to have better social media posts. But at the same time, remember what you're doing. Because for me, I'm not trying to go viral. So I don't need to break my back as much to like hit these certain points. I'm trying to reach people. I'm trying to connect with them and to help them. So that's probably not going to go viral, and I'm okay with that. But there was this period of time where I got really obsessed with trying to optimize things, and I moved away from my true intention. And so checking in with why am I actually doing this? Because just because you don't have a million followers or your posts aren't getting, in the tens of thousands of likes doesn't mean it's not valuable content. It just needs to be valuable for the people that you are trying to reach.
Yeah, I think those are some really valuable points. And like a couple just struck out to me that I'm gonna call out. Like, first off, I think I loved how you guys said that, like it's important to allocate your time. And also it's okay to record, a bunch of reels in that one slot because you've dedicated your personal time to record those, right? And at the end of the day, like you mentioned, like Alina as well, like you can disperse those reels, across a specific time period. I think for students especially, whether students want to start a business, or even just navigate school and how to go about entrepreneurship. I think that is super important, and can be used in day to day as well, like allocating your time where you feel like is most fruitful. And then depending on that, like what Matt said, like make sure you know what your goal is, right? Even like goal with academics, but also goal with, entrepreneurship and these big business goals, knowing that what is the aim of it all, and then allocating your time accordingly. Because I feel like our time is limited. I feel like for me, at least, days are going by so fast. I'm on co-op right now, and I feel like my time is just getting like dispersed everywhere. So, definitely allocating your time is super important. So, yeah, I just love how you guys said that. And knowing what your goal is because it can get confused over time. So, kind of making sure you have your eye on the prize, super important. And I think that leads into our last question. This is a question from our listeners. So they asked, to end us off, what has been the most defining moment in your career that has pivoted the way you see failure now? And I'm sure when you guys started off, in your career journeys, you guys must have seen failure completely different than the way you see it now. And you guys have shared that throughout this entire episode series that, the experiences that you've gone through, they've changed your view on it. And now you don't see failure as something that was a negative impact, but you've seen it as something you've learned and something that's, been a benefit in your life. So, yeah, what would you guys say is the most defining career moment, if you have any, that you'd like to share?
There are so many. There's so many. I mean, I don't think there was one specific moment that I can pinpoint because I've grown as an entrepreneur at various different points on my journey, and even as recently as changing industry, going from mining into tech, and it not working out. That was a, a defining moment in how I look at, the quote unquote failing. So, I mean, I would probably say, look, there's never going to be that one moment, this aha moment where you go, now I'm going to change into a better person, because different times call for different things, and different chapters of your journey will call for different changes, and good changes, not just bad ones. But I would say, to start, like, if I could maybe dial back to when I was a student first graduating, I think the defining moment in who making me who I am today is actually my co-op placement, right? Because being in co-op, I really find that it was very valuable, because it allowed me to explore different industry with very little investment, right? And so, um, I think the defining moment was me saying, "Hey, I want to get into finance," going into a co-op placement and going, "Oh man, that is not for me." So, and being and holding my ground and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna be true to who I am. I'm not gonna be the person who's gonna graduate and climb the corporate ladder. I'm not that person." And saying, "I'm now going to commit myself to finding what is right for me." And I think that has then followed me through my career, is that I've always been true to who I am inside. I haven't changed in terms of being true to whether it's my integrity or my values, or my approach to work. As long as something still speaks to those things and those pillars in my life, I would go for it. But I think, yeah, I think being in as a student, being in co-op really helped me, figure out that I'm not going to do something I don't want to do just because that's the standard or that's the path that's been drawn, right?
Yeah, I think very similarly. I can't say it was a particular moment, but what has changed my life professionally and personally is when I accepted internally that this is a process, and that um, we don't really recognize how we change a little bit every day. And so we can feel really stuck and overwhelmed. I'm not getting anywhere. But when you think back, when you get old like me and you think back on um, where you were a year ago, 5 years ago, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that. So the the big moment for me was when that really dropped in, and I'm like, you know what? From now on, I am going to just know that whatever my emotions are that are coming up, or what storylines I'm buying into that aren't helping me and are keeping me stressed and keeping me not in alignment with where I want to go, because I feel I need to achieve X or get Y or whatever it is. If I now that I've accepted that I'm going to get there, I don't know how I'm going to do it. Where I'm going today might not be where I'm going tomorrow, but it literally doesn't matter as long as I am staying in the driver's seat. Um, that was such a huge thing for me, and that's something that I hope that I wish I could have had back in school. And so I hope you I hope everyone listening learns this faster than I did.
No, I think those are great insights. And I feel like as a student, like what you guys said is like it deeply resonates. Because I feel like with school especially, things can kind of go like they kind of ebb and flow. And so I'm sure that's similar to what you guys have gone through. But I feel like in university especially, like failure is seen as a very negative thing. And it makes sense as to why, everybody obviously wants to succeed, sorry, and everyone obviously wants to do their best. But I think throughout this series, you guys have really shed light on this recurring theme that, failure is like a stepping stone to something greater. And that, if there is a low moment or somewhere that you didn't do as well as you hoped, that's not the end of it all. And I think that's something that I really learned from the series that, even though you have or you've failed or gone low in another area, there's always an area that you'll pick yourself up at, and you're not going to stay stagnant, right? There's always area for growth and room as long as you have breath in your lungs. So there's always time to grow. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I feel like that ends our last episode of this series. So as we wrap up this episode, we hope that, all of these amazing answers, answer all of the questions you guys had during the past 5 episodes. We do have exciting news. This is not the end of this series. Basically, we have a panel with Matt and Alina on March 6th from 11 to 12 p.m. After you sign up, you'll receive an email with more information. But this will basically explore entrepreneurship from Alina and Matt's perspective and give a very personal one-on-one panel discussion. So if you are interested in learning more, the link is provided in the description box below and on our Instagram. So we'd love to see you there, and we'd love to kind of continue this conversation during our panel discussion. Again, thank you so much, Alina and Matt, for leading this series and coming today to record this episode. Super excited, and I really hope that students will learn a lot about failure and that it's not the end of it all. There's so much more past the low moments, and there's always going to be the high peaks as well. So thank you for listeners for listening, and thank you, Alina and Matt. We look forward to seeing you guys all next week at our in-person fireside chat. See you there.
So much.
Thank you.